Hello there, Jay here, completely unknown game designer extraordinaire, and I am about to talk a little bit about level design, because I've kinda been asked a question on the matter by fellow game developer and classy human NamidaSai. In the comments section to one of my videos, Sai has said,
I'd love to hear more about your level design tricks, and how you manage pacing.
And this is not, in my eyes, a short question. Well, it's technically not a question at all, but I shall nonetheless attempt to elaborate on one of my main methods in this video. Hopefully, this should differ from other design theorists' takes on the subject of level design because, well, I'm not going to be the billionth person to go over how Super Mario Bros. First level teaches the player. It's been done, and I'd like to lessen the risk of the big N sending a DMCA my way for using footage of their games. So, pacing as requested. To begin with, I want to briefly discuss a theatrical term known as 3-act structure. Yes, theatre, how pretentious, right, what a hipster. But hey, drawing from as many sources of inspiration as possible is a thing I think we should all do when creating any kind of art. And yes, this will be video game relevant and more importantly, gameplay relevant. Moving on, Wild Wikipedia defines 3-act structure as:
the 3-act structure is a model used in narrative fiction that divides a story into 3 parts, acts, often called the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution.
I use an adapted version of this model for my level designs most of the time. Not all the time, because some levels may be better suited to a simpler structural arrangement, but seldom more complex than this. As for how I've adapted this, let us now look at these 3 acts, so to speak. The setup, confrontation, and resolution of a level. I shall do this by way of example, taking a brief look at one of the very finest first levels in video game history, Sonic the Hedgehog's brilliant opener, Green Hill Zone 1. I will quickly note that although the game uses act to differentiate the separate levels of each of its 6 zones, the way I'm using the word here is to divide the level into 3 separate concepts. Confusing perhaps, but I did not invent any of this terminology. 1. Setup. The setup in Green Hill Zone 1's case is the classic teach the player moment, which is employed almost identically to that classic World 1-1 from Super Mario Bros., but then quickly elaborated upon. After the initial setup to explain running into enemy kills, jumping into an item box destroys it and grants the contents to the player, we are now greeted with an incline, an upward slope. Here, the game will demonstrate one of the key things that in 1991 made Sonic unique amongst other platform games. The player character's momentum is affected by the terrain. Running up this incline will slow down Sonic slightly. There's a nice bridge displaying in an incredibly subtle way another principle that some objects may be affected by Sonic's weight, with another tutorial moment of how rings will sometimes act as a visual guide and how you can avoid a nasty surprise by jumping right for them. And then a decline, a downward slope. This decline, conversely to the incline before the bridge, will increase Sonic's momentum enough so that he can run up the following curve in a nice miniature trickshot movement and be flung a little bit into the air, showing yet another principle here, that horizontal movement and momentum can be transferred vertically. Then I'd say that's the end of this level's first act. 2. Confrontation. Keep running and Sonic encounters a different, jagged incline loaded with enemies. Although we're not at let's get serious levels of challenge quite yet on this first level, it is nonetheless more challenging now as the enemy density temporarily rises sharply. But the placement of this first one will teach yet another important thing if the player hasn't already learned it by accident, that jumping in Sonic the Hedgehog is also attacking. Not much of a confrontation, is it? Well, there's more. After this small gauntlet of Robotnik's finest, we've got the first jump over an actual pit in this game. If the player was running on the ground, they'll be stopped by the introduction of this guy right here, who will provide ample elevation to get to the ledge that is just in view to the right. If the player was blind jumping, like they shouldn't, there's a chance they can also make it to the ledge. Either way, they may well be taught a further lesson in how Sonic's weight can affect certain parts of the environment. But should the player fall, it's okay, as Sonic now sees spikes to jump over and a mild reward. One way or the other, ignoring for the purposes of this video a non-obvious upper route, we see the concluding part to this level's second act with this now familiar bad boy, the Loop-de-Loop. This guy is the quote-unquote boss of the second act. Is it a challenge? Maybe it was in 1991 if you'd never seen it before. Like many things already discussed and through the entirety of Sonic the Hedgehog, if the player keeps running, then they'll be fine. If not, this is where they learn another valuable lesson that literally every subsequent game in the series removed the need for, that speed and momentum are things to be built up over time. Run around this loop and then, time for the level's third act. 3. Resolution. It's a great word that, resolution. In computing, and therefore game design terms, it is often taken to represent the pixel density of one's visual display device. However, in more general terms like we're using here, and certainly the theatrical origin from which the 3-act structure comes, it means to resolve a thing. A problem is overcome, a loop is expertly sprinted around. After which, look what happens, here's the payoff. Wow, that was great. Let's see it again. There's not much more level after that, just a mild bit of what we've had before, followed by the winning stretch to the end. After that loop and being flung into a literal cloud of collectible rings, I don't know about you, but I feel great. Cool, let's do more of that. And that is my own personal interpretation of 3-act structure in level design. Of course, if the player strays off the beaten track and takes the platform route above the loop, this is entirely moot and it breaks down a little bit. But given that most Sonic games are designed to be played initially as a roller coaster, with exploration happening on subsequent playthroughs of the game, most people will have experienced the route described, and I'd argue this as completely intended. So, how do I employ this 3-act structure in my own levels? 1. Setup. Here is where I teach the player something, usually. Either a new concept or something I'll be repeating later on, or just how the level is going to play out. And I'll often make this the easiest of usually 3 iterations of any given challenge the level has. 3 challenges in ascending difficulty for 3 acts. Makes sense. I want to also note that I'll even do this for late game levels to introduce something new. Even though it may be the last world or whatever, to my mind, you either continue bringing something new to the table no matter how small, or your game is dull. Pick one. 2. Confrontation. Do it again but harder is generally my go-to mantra for the middle part of a level. Of course, I personally like to give the player small rest areas between acts, so that will be a thing I've also done, but not always. But this is where I really let the level start to show its teeth. In the first act, you showed the player how. Now it's fine to actually test them on that. 3. Resolution. There are 2 ways I generally have the player resolve a level, and it's either that they've got the hardest but flashiest challenge for the entire level to really feel good about beating, or I'll stick in a feel good set piece to that same end. And again, if I'm able to, there will have been a tiny rest stop for the player before this. Especially important if I've done the former, harder choice, so they can sit for a moment and assess the danger they're about to overcome. This rising challenge is something I've personally referred to as the 1-2-3 method, whereby a challenge is introduced, iterated upon, and then honed to dangerous perfection. I won't always use it for level designs, but I personally see this as a solid foundation upon which to design a level. And that's it for now. Hopefully some of you found this video useful. And also hopefully, my good friend NamidaSai has found value in it too. Sai's a good fellow who provided his voice for this video, and you should totally look up his YouTube channel and Twitter, both listed in the description. Speaking of which, shout out to my friend Steve for being the voice of Wikipedia here. His channel and Twitter can also be found below. And whilst you're dishing out the algorithm food, please give this video a like, give the notification bell a ring, give the subscribe button a relaxing massage because it's been a long day, and then reward your good selves by staying as beautiful as you are. Thank you.